Generic man on the internet here, bringing you information you already know about on a topic you probably don't care about. Today we're talking about Conqueror, specifically League of Legends patch 9.4 Conqueror. So random internet man, I hear you say. What qualifies you to talk about Conqueror? Well, nothing at all. Take everything you hear with a bag of salt. I'm really not qualified to talk about this. I'm not a pro player or a challenger player or even barely good at the game. I've been hard stuck low plat and high gold for the last 2 years, so there you go. If you've been avoiding patch notes like the plague or can't read tooltips, this is what changed about Conqueror. The old Conqueror, after 4 seconds in combat, your first basic attack against an enemy champion gives you 6 to 35 attack damage between levels 1 and 18 of course, for 3 seconds, and it converts your damage, or at least 20% of it, against champions into true damage. Melee champions of course can refresh this buff by redamaging enemy champions, while ranged champions cannot do this. Now the new Conqueror after patch 9.4 is that damaging abilities and attacks will grant you 3 to 15 adaptive force for 3 seconds, this time 8 seconds for melee champs, stacking up to 5 times. 10% of your damage against champions will be converted to true damage, and it will heal you for that amount at max stacks. So let's clarify something about adaptive force. The way adaptive force works is if you have, let's say, 15 adaptive force, as an AP champion, you have 15 AP. As an AD champion, you have 60% of 15 adaptive force, which is you have 9 AD. So adaptive force does not at all work the same way for every champ, and you should note that while thinking of champs that can apply Conqueror. Now let's get into why I think Conqueror is good, or at least I think is good for ranged marksmen. Number 1, nostalgia. Fervor of Battle was an old rune that used to exist for AD carries, and we loved it before the rework, and this new Conqueror feels like that. I'll leave you to do your research on Fervor of Battle if you want to know what the details of that were, but know that Conqueror brings back a lot of memories of that. It has the same stacking mechanic, and I think this will bring back a lot of old playstyles, namely the extended trades or the extended fights. I strongly believe that this new rune system that we have currently has led to a lot of bad habits in the laning phase, which you might disagree with. If you look at runes like Press the Attack that relies on 3 autos to proc the rune, or Electrocute 3 abilities for a short burst, Airy an auto and ability trade, Comet 1 tap ability trade, stuff like Grasp and Conqueror, at least old Conqueror, where you had to stack up on minions, then either 2 autos or an ability to like proc it and get the rune off. That's a lot of short limited amount of engagement between the other player, which I never really liked or favored. Now when you compare that to runes like old Fervor of Battle, which didn't have cooldowns, you just had to fight and stack, and the longer the fight goes, the more stacks you had and the more damage you did. You can take extended trades really well. Same thing with old Warlords, where as long as you were below a threshold, you would get lifesteal, and you could just keep fighting as long as you were alive. That was, I think, the golden age of AD carries. For example, Lucian, when we had Fervor of Battle, would either dash in and all in a fight, or full rotation combo for a trade and get out and win hugely, or just fight till the death and usually still win because it's Lucian in the early game. But now with Press the Attack and Klepto, when it was okay on Lucian, he relies on auto, an ability, and his double shot passive to proc Press the Attack and to proc Kleptomancy, which I think has led to a lot of bad habits being developed as Lucian players for taking short trades. And if you're not a pro player or a challenger player, that is a noob trap. It is a noob trap because good players know that you don't have to proc your runes to do damage in the lane or win a trade. They know the more intricate things of the lanes and how it works, versus someone who's a lower elo who just thinks, to win a trade, I need to proc Press the Attack, and will do stupid things or overcommit on a bad trade just to proc the rune. That's why I think it's a noob trap. Another reason why I think Conqueror is good now for ranged champions is that there's a wider array of champions that can use this Conqueror. This stems from the fact that it gives adaptive force now instead of just AD. So not only can ranged marksmen use this, but some mages some battle mages like Azir and Cassiopeia can use this to tremendous effect, which I think adds to the fact that Riot's been trying to push diversity in the bot lane. Because now we can have Cassiopeia bottom with Conqueror. Number 3, it is another damage rune added to the precision tree, which I think makes Conqueror very, very appealing. This is in contrast to Fleet Footwork, which is a sustain rune, Lethal Tempo, which is just an attack speed buff. Press the Attack was a damage rune, or still is a damage rune, but it has limited usage for a lot of players, and champions that want to take Press the Attack don't because of how the mechanics work. You can't always get your 3 auto trades off, you can't always get the exposure damage, and Conqueror is going to be a great substitute for that. Now, the first downside of the new Conqueror, a bit of anti-synergy with Last Whisper. If you guys remember, one of the bigger points in our fight against the old Infinity Edge was that it converted some of our damage to true damage, which gives you a bit of anti-synergy with Last Whisper, because if you're doing true damage, you don't need an item that ignores armor. But the problem was the true damage you're doing is so little, it literally does not matter to the tank that you're doing true damage. And building Last Whisper with that doesn't quite work well because you're doing very little true damage, and the damage that isn't true, Last Whisper, doesn't give you enough armor ignore for that to be impactful. And it's kind of the same thing with this new Conqueror and the fact that at max stacks you get damage converted to true damage. Another reason why the new Conqueror isn't so great on ranged champions is that it only lasts 3 seconds. So each stack lasts 3 seconds, and you stack it up to 5, you get the max stacks for only 3 seconds, which can be good in the later stages of the game. But the problem with that is, if you're a crit champion, at the later stages of the game, you're killing things tremendously fast with big crits. So you either will kill things before you get your max stacks, or you will get your max stacks for a few autos, and then by the time you've repositioned for the fight, you have to restack it again. Now, is it OP? No, I don't think so. It's significantly weaker than before 9.4 Conqueror, and which I think actually makes it okay. It's viable on spell slingers like Lucian, and whatever ranged marksman also spell slings. That's just one good example I have. I don't know, but I've been using it on Lucian, and it's great on Lucian. I've used it on other champions to varying degrees of success, but I find that on crit champions like Jinx, Caitlyn, it doesn't really work as well, because a few fights in the game you will get max Conqueror stats and proc it. That's usually around mid game, but early game, the fights aren't long enough for you to get your stacks. And late game, the fights are either too short because you do a lot of damage with crits, or you have to keep repositioning in fight because there's so many damage threats and you actually can't get your Conqueror stacks. So how do we make Conqueror more viable for more champions? I think give us more time to work with it. Even just a 1 second buff from 3 to 4 would give us significantly more time to keep our stacks active and to actually get to max stacks and use it, which would make it so much better on crit champions and champions that build a lot of attack speed and skill later into the game. While I do believe a lot of this Conqueror's hidden power is in the stacking adaptive force, the adaptive force doesn't give enough value to attack damage based marksman for it to make it viable for us. Another way we can make Conqueror better, and this is just a quality of life, let's have the stats Conquerors give be tracked better. Because right now the rune itself tracks the total true damage you've done with it, the true damage that would have been mitigated, and the total healing. But I would also like to know how much stack and adaptive force I'm getting. So at the end of the game, I want to be able to click on my runes and see, okay, I get a total of 15 or 20 or 150 adaptive force over the game from my use of Conqueror. Then that way, I think we can now start to talk about Conqueror in terms of efficiency, like how we talk about item efficiency based on how much you pay for it and the stats it gives. We can start to talk about Conqueror in that same way. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and have a good day.